Both sides of the political aisle have claimed victory on student debt in President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's new debt ceiling agreement, with the Republicans saying that the end of the student loan pause is finalized, and the White House claiming that nothing from their side was forfeited. The deal says that the pause on student loans will end 60 days after June 30th.
Representative Ayanna Pressley has filed an amendment to preserve the student loan payment pause in the debt deal. In her amendment, Pressley wrote, "The student loan payment pause has been an essential lifeline for workers and families struggling to make ends meet." Joining us now to discuss is Deputy Executive Director at the Student Borrower Protection Center, Persis. Welcome, Persis.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here.
All right, so let's break down what is really happening here. Both sides are in some ways claiming victory. The student debt payment pause, which has been going on since Donald Trump instated it in the early days of COVID, the deadline has been pushed back repeatedly. The current deadline that is going to wrap up this summer could potentially continue to be pushed back, giving student debtors continued relief, at least up until the Supreme Court decision, and beyond the Supreme Court decision, frankly, except for as part of this deal, it is finally being enshrined as officially over at that time. What do you make of that bargain?
Yeah, so we are very frustrated with the bargain, right? Because what it does is it locks the president and the administration into taking an action before having any idea about what is going to happen at the Supreme Court. I think it's really critical for us to remember why there's cancellation in the first place. Back in August, when the president announced his cancellation plan, what he said is that we are going to restart repayment, but the way to restart repayment on the student loan system is to provide borrowers with cancellation. Because if we do not have cancellation, what we know is going to happen is we know that there is going to be huge financial distress among student loan borrowers. And the only way to prevent that is with cancellation. And so, there was a plan in place to possibly start payments back in September, but now the president has locked himself into that position without knowing the outcome, and now borrowers are at the mercy of what the Supreme Court does.
And with that decision expected soon, I believe, how will the outcome of that case affect the how are you predicting it's going to actually affect them having to pay back student loans? Because there's been debate over the process was in motion and then payments were halted again, all of that. What do you think is going to come out of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, the reality is that 40 million borrowers have their financial futures on the line here. And it really is a very tenuous place for student loan borrowers right now. Obviously, we don't know what the outcome of that case is going to be. We're all waiting on that. But it is really critical because I think as the data shows, that this relief is absolutely necessary in order to prevent borrowers from falling into default when payments resume again. And I think one of the things that's important for everyone to understand is how devastating default is for student loan borrowers. When you default on your loans, you can have your wages seized without ever going to court. You can have your tax refund, including vital refundable tax credits like the earned income tax credit for working families, seized. Folks on Social Security or on disability can have those benefits seized. And so there's really devastating consequences of defaulting on their loans. We know that from previous pauses that this is the likely outcome unless there is cancellation. And this will impact not just the 40-something million borrowers, but their communities and their families as well. So I think it's not just about these borrowers, but about our economy at large.
What would you say to someone who says those effects are entirely foreseeable and are the natural consequence of borrowing more money than you can possibly pay back, and is a good reason not to actually do that in the first place?
Well, I think it is worth us stepping back and looking at how we got here, right? And why do we have a student loan crisis? And it is because of decades of disinvestment from the federal and the state governments. And that is why we're here. We have a lot of folks in the Supreme Court, on Congress, that when they went to college actually was affordable. But right now we're in a situation where you need a degree for economic mobility. We have spent generations telling people that education is their pathway out of poverty, into the middle class. and then we make college entirely unaffordable for them and absolutely hammer them when they don't succeed. And so I think that there is a lot more going on than just some borrowers borrowing more than they could afford. And I think that's why we are in a student loan crisis now. The impact of that crisis was exacerbated by the pandemic. And that's why we need to have cancellation if we are to have a hope of moving forward right now.
I think that's such an important point. I mean, it does feel very odd and sort of gaslighty to have spent my entire life being told that the path to upward mobility is education. The reason why my particular demographic group is economically disadvantaged is because we don't value education. To say that a college degree is absolutely necessary for upward mobility, to have people telling you that who spent a few $1,000s a semester on college, to then be asked to be told explicitly it is worth it for you to pay $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year for college. And then at this juncture be told, oh, actually, never mind. We're changing our minds. Joe Biden recently issuing a statement saying, we want to move forward to a world where people don't have to have a college education to get ahead. I think that's admirable. I think there are many people for whom college isn't an appropriate fit. But it's worth noting, one, that this cancellation also applies to vocational programs, which we're also trying to get relief for. And that, two, the world we live in today absolutely does invest a significant advantage on people who do go to college. And the status quo that we are maintaining is a world where if you have rich parents, you get to avail yourself of that advantage. If you have poor parents, you don't get to avail yourself of that advantage. So why is it that when we're picking winners and losers, it seems as though people who, let's say, applied for PPP funds, like two of the Democrats who voted for overturning this moratorium and got $60,000+ of their personal company loans forgiven, are the winners, and the student debtors who are too poor to afford to go to college in the first place without incurring significant debt are the losers.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're changing the bar on folks, right? We're shifting the bar. We're saying that if you don't get an education and you are, struggling financially, now, well, that's your fault for not getting an education. But if you do try to get an education and you don't succeed, and there's lots of reasons why people don't, that, we are going to put the full force of the government on you, and tell you, it is more important for you to pay back your student loans than it is for you to be able to feed your families. And I think, in terms of shifting the bar, the other thing that people need to be aware of that's happening this week is there's another vote happening almost simultaneously with the debt ceiling deal, the Congressional Review Act, which would actually not just, roll back the president's debt relief plan, which he announced in August, but also the seventh payment pause, which was announced simultaneously. And what that would do is it would actually add back, we've had this payment pause for a number of years, but this Congressional Review Act would add back the unpaid interest starting from September. So public service workers who have been counting on time towards public service loan forgiveness that they've been accruing during the payment pause since September, that would be rolled back. People who've gotten their loans canceled because they've been engaged in public service could have that loan cancellation revoked as well. So those are the stakes that are on the table this week. And there's a lot happening. And borrowers, I think, need to be aware that they're being used as political pawns in this moment in a very hot political debate. But a lot of it is because folks were just trying to get ahead and provide for their families and for public service to provide for their communities as well.
So just so I understand, you're saying that they will have to pay interest, they might have to pay interest dating back to last September?
Yeah, so if this Congressional Review Act resolution is successful, it's going to roll back the payment pause to September of 2022. And remembering that the payment pause froze interest, it made it so that people didn't have to make payments, and it counted those payments as qualifying payments towards public service loan forgiveness. And so what would happen is if we roll all that back, it means all of that interest is going to be due for borrowers. It means that folks are going to, we're going to have to do something with the fact that they haven't made payments in almost 9 months. And so there's a big question about, would we accidentally trip everybody into default immediately? But yeah, and that, if you were counting on that time to get you towards forgiveness because you've been working in public service, that could be taken away.
So just so people who might not be aware of what those interest payments can be like, that could be as high as what, a $10,000 bill or even more depending on how many loans you've taken out. Let's say you're a public interest, a housing lawyer, a public defender, and have the full $160,000+ of a loan. I know it's more than that from your law school debt. What you're saying is you're taking this low-paying job to go back into your community and offer these public services, but now you might be hit with an unexpected, 8% interest on that loan amount, which for me, my first year out of college was, I think I paid like out of law school was something like $18,000 in interest or something that first year. That could happen to people.
If this resolution is successful, that is what we project would happen.
Incredible stuff. Thank you, Persis. Thank you, Joe Biden. More rising coming after this.